Greetings, this is Management 430, Human Resource Management, and this is part of our module on data and technology in the competencies that HR professionals need to have. This particular series of lectures will be on data management and human resource information systems, basically the portals with which we manage our data online. Obviously, there's a whole host of issues that we need to be addressing, which is making sure data is secure and private, and that we have access to things so that we can run reports and do analytics and get a sense of whether or not we have the correct data that we need to be able to make good decisions about people. So human resource information systems is a huge area in the field of computer management information systems. It's a subset, obviously, of the of what CMIS can do. And I know that there are some programs out there, particularly SUNY Albany has a good program on HRIS if people are interested in focusing on that and want to kind of combine their love of computers and technology and their love of HR and go into a cutting edge field where you can work for companies like PeopleSoft and things like that. So we will talk about the different ways that data is managed and is important in the organization. The data that will be managed will be the data for the people that are connected to the organization, whether they are employees or other stakeholders. Primarily, though, employees, because we are dealing with all sorts of data in terms of private information about who they are, skills and certifications that they've gotten, records on discipline or records on certifications that they have, any kind of performance interventions, performance appraisals, compensation plans, all those sorts of things, where they are in terms of succession planning and things like that. So the HRIS is the thing that stores all that information, and then we create portals, or we create a dashboard that gives us quick access to the data that's available in the HRIS, and the dashboard automatically generates reports for us that we want and we need to be seeing at a glance. An HRIS is a subset of what we call an Enterprise Resource Planning System, an ERPS. The ERPS is the integrated system for each organization that integrates accounting, finance, marketing, HR, manufacturing, whatever it is. It coordinates all of that data in one location. And so we need to know sales, we need to know finance, we need to know customer service feedback, because that is an input often for sales reps and for employees who have direct customer interaction. And so we need to have all that data available to us at our fingertips, and it's important to have a system that's integrated. We don't want the HR system to stand alone, separate from the rest of the systems that manage the organization, because everything is integrated and works together. If you remember from, again, the first module, we talk about that Venn diagram, how the way that we organize things impacts the tasks, and it impacts our leadership styles, and impacts ethics, and impacts who we need to hire and what kind of training they need. So all of these things are well integrated. So we need to make sure those systems can talk to each other. So we've got a good ERP that is the umbrella that manages all those functions, and then the HRIS, the human resource side of it, is a subset of that has to be integrated. The human resource information system is the way that we acquire and store, manipulate, I don't like the word manipulate, but analyze, really, retrieve and distribute data. When I hear people talk about manipulating data, that gives me the willies. I don't really like that term, and I don't know what they mean by manipulating, because I don't believe anybody should be manipulating data. But if we take it from a non-negative connotation and just say manipulate is how we organize the data, then I can agree with that terminology. But I don't want anybody to believe that it is the negative attribute of that word, which is to manipulate, is to utilize it to control people, and that's not the case at all. We are manipulating the data, meaning that we are organizing the data in a way that makes it usable for us. So just to be cautious about how that term is used. We analyze, we retrieve, and then we redistribute data, right? So this information has to be gathered, and then it has to be redistributed. And that is the stuff that goes into the data management plan, and then we create the output reports that we're looking for. It is an internet-based system. It is absolutely digital, and we have to be careful of, obviously, cybersecurity issues when we are managing data, particularly private data for our employees, including things like Social Security numbers and healthcare records and things like that, which absolutely have to be kept private. It can be a good cost-saving tool if the system is done well, and if the system that you're currently using, like a paper and pencil system, is creating inefficiencies and errors. Obviously, for smaller organizations, investing in an HRIS is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more expensive. But from a cost-benefit perspective, the larger the organization, the easier it should be to have an HRIS system in place, because it can save you money. We just want to be sure, right, if we're going to be implementing tools and systems, that we need to know what the break-even point is and what the cost-benefit is. If we find that it costs more than the efficiency gains it will give us, then it may not be the right choice to do that. But by and large, in this day and age, I definitely would be hard-pressed to argue that any investment in technology or information systems is a bad investment. But it's always good to make sure you do that break-even calculation to figure out whether or not it is a worthwhile investment to do, because not all investments are actually worthwhile. The goal of the HRIS is to track the employees over their life cycle. From the moment they are recruited, we gather their resume and their application data. We keep records of their assessments from the selection process. We keep track of any violations of employment laws. We keep track of their performance management. We keep track of their compensation. And any other issues that are important for us to know, training, certifications, those types of things. So it's over the entire life cycle of that employee, from the moment they read the advertisement for the job and learn that there's a position available for them, and then they make the decision to apply. It is an incredibly valuable source of data that needs to be managed well and protected. Because it is that information that helps us to make sound, data-driven decisions for the organization. When our employee data is automated in an HRIS, it has tremendous benefits for us. First of all, it gives us easy access to information rather than having to go to different filing systems, making it difficult to find information, because paper and pencil files are not fun. Having lived in a time when we did not have internet and we did not have digital access to things, I can affirm how challenging it was to keep records, and to keep records private. So it does give us easy access to data. It enables us then to retrieve it, to analyze it, to look at what is going on. And when we are ready to do our analytics, where we're trying to say A and B can predict C, we have that data available to us, merged from multiple sources from our enterprise resource system. It gives us the opportunity to do things in a quicker manner. If it used to be that we have to pull paper files, and we would have to download, we would have to hand copy data over, and then we would put it in spreadsheets, and we would do our analysis that way. And the nice thing about the HRIS is I don't need to go to a separate file and copy and paste stuff over. It's all made available to us, and we can ask the program to integrate it. It integrates it and enables us to do the analyses that we want. But the important thing is it's a time saver when we can do this, because it used to be weeks before we would be able to do those kind of reports. And now, a couple presses of a button, and that data is compiled for us with the ERP, and it enables us then to get the output that we're looking for. So the data that we get from this HRIS is foundational for our ability to assess metrics and analytics. And we want this data to be high quality. Why? Because if we have poor quality data, we are making decisions based on uncertain information or things that we know is not reliable and valuable to us. So number one, it gives us a way to gather things, and the way that we measure things is the way that we gather the data. So we create a measure, whatever that might be, and that measure has a series of questions, whether that's qualitative or quantitative, and it gathers the data together for us. So it's a measurement tool. The HRIS provides us the opportunity to program in what measure we're looking for, turnover rates or things like that. Poor measurement gives us unreliable data. So let me give you an example. We've talked about already in another lecture about reliability and validity and how important reliability and validity is. So reliability means simply consistent. That if I measure something every day, once a day, and it should give me the same measure every day, assuming the thing I'm measuring is stable, like my height. From day to day, my height is fairly stable. It should be stable. The only time it starts to fade is as we get older, we start to actually shrink. Our spinal column compresses, and we lose a few inches at the top. So other than that, though, by and large, the average person, if you measure their height every day, it should be very consistent. But let's say there's an error in my measuring tape, to measure the height of somebody. And I know my true height is 5'8" tall, but every single time that tape measure measures me, it says I'm 5'6½". It's an inch and a half short for whatever reason. Probably in the manufacturing process, the hash marks were put on incorrectly. So it is not an accurate measure. Now, I don't necessarily know that, when I buy it, but I might find that every time I measure somebody and they're like, but I'm not 5'6½", I'm 5'8". So we need to figure out what's going on. Now, is that information reliable? 100%. It gives me the same result every single time, 5'6½". But is it accurate? And the answer to that is no, it's not accurate. So reliable is important first and foremost. Like, you're not going to get a valid measure unless you know that the information it's measuring is consistent and it's accurate. So we need to have both of those. It's a two-pronged approach. It has to be consistent, which is the reliability issue, and it has to be valid or accurate in what it's doing. Like anything, garbage in, garbage out. If we have garbage metrics that are difficult to quantify and difficult to access, then you're going to get low quality output. Our goal, of course, is to make sure we've got high quality data that is accurate representation of what it is that we're trying to measure, that there is no debate, that we know that not only is it consistent, but it also is accurate in its approach to things. And when we have that, then we know we're going to get good outputs, or at least it increases the likelihood we'll get good outputs. So there are some technical terms we should be aware of. For example, what is a database? And you all have covered this in obviously some CMIS classes that you've taken, but just as a refresher, a database is where we store structured data. There are rows and columns. Each column represents a variable that is of interest to us. For example, someone's start date, someone's address, someone's age, someone's title, and then the rows all represent each employee. So when we think about an Excel spreadsheet, right, the rows and the columns all have a value that we need to depend on. And so that database has to be very structured so that it's easy to sort the data and access the data to be able to do our analyses. there is a rise in semi or unstructured data, and so because of that, we have to find good ways to store that data that makes it easily accessible to us. And then, of course, there are things called data lakes, which is how we get it is the source of the large amount of raw data. So basically what will happen is information will get input into your HRIS, it goes to the data lake, and then the data lake can distribute it to a structured database for us to do our analyses, or we can request it to be organized in a database structure so that we can do our analysis. Lastly is this concept of data visualization. What's the story that we want to tell? What kind of tools do we want to use to represent our data? For example, do you want to use a pie chart that represents what percentage of a whole somebody is engaging in a particular behavior? So we might have the universe of benefits that the organization is requesting, and we can say this percentage of people have this benefit, this percentage of people have this benefit. So we can do trend analyses. So we need to have line charts or along that line. So we have to decide how we want to present that data, what we want it to look like in order for us to be able to track and to utilize it in a way that makes sense. So it needs to be very straightforward. It should not be complex, and it should be the tool we use to tell the story, the analytical story that we want to tell. Again, I'm not implying that we have a story in mind and then we manipulate the data to get the story we want, but we have to look at the data, and that data is the story that we want to tell. So we need to make sure that we understand the way the information is presented to us first and foremost, and then we can create the story, the plan, the analysis, and the recommendations.